Pass It On by Pam Shiller. Illustrated by Carol Newsom. Pass It On. Lily was admiring the family portrait she had drawn for her school homework while she ate her breakfast. Suddenly, from out of nowhere, her cat, Yo-Yo, jumped right in the middle of her bowl of cereal. Splash! Milk and cereal flew everywhere and landed all over Lily and Lily's family portrait. Lily let out a gasp and then began to cry. Lily's mother kissed her daughter on the forehead and said, "It's okay, Lily. Come with me. We'll get you cleaned up." Lily's grandmother gently patted the family portrait dry with a soft towel, and then she laid it on the window sill in the sun so it could finish drying. She cleaned up the mess and poured Lily a new bowl of cereal. When Lily came back to eat her breakfast, she hugged her grandmother and thanked her for cleaning up the spilt cereal and most of all for saving her family portrait. Her grandmother said, "Lily, helping people always creates a joyful feeling in my heart. I hope you will think about helping someone today." When someone does something kind for you, you say thank you, and then pass it on by showing kindness to someone else. When Lily arrived at school, she noticed that her teacher, Mrs. Ramirez, had her hands full and needed help opening the door. Lily quickly opened the door for her. When Mrs. Ramirez thanked her, Lily said, "My grandmother was kind to me this morning. I want to pass it on." Later that day, Mrs. Ramirez noticed the custodian, Mr. Lee, stacking the chairs in the cafeteria after lunch. She stopped to help him. When Mr. Lee thanked her, Mrs. Ramirez said, "My student Lily was kind to me this morning. I want to pass it on." That afternoon, Mr. Lee saw the principal, Mr. Abbott, putting notes in the teachers' mailboxes. He stopped his work and helped Mr. Abbott get all the notes in the right boxes. When Mr. Abbott thanked him, Mr. Lee said, "Mrs. Ramirez was kind to me this afternoon. I want to pass it on." At the end of the school day, Mr. Abbott looked out his office window and saw the bus driver, Mrs. Jackson, struggling to back the bus into a parking spot. He left his office and went outside to help. When Mrs. Jackson thanked him, Mr. Abbott said, "Mr. Lee was kind to me this afternoon. I want to pass it on." When Mrs. Jackson dropped off Lily at her bus stop, she noticed Lily's grandmother trying to help a turtle make it safely across the street. She turned on the bus lights and put out the stop sign on the side of the bus to stop the traffic for grandmother and the turtle. When grandmother thanked her, Mrs. Jackson said, "The principal, Mr. Abbott, was kind to me today. I want to pass it on." Lily's grandmother smiled a knowing smile. She waved goodbye and walked her granddaughter into the house. Lily curled up in the big chair in the living room with Yo-Yo. She told her grandmother that she had passed along the kindness her grandmother had shown to her that morning by helping Mrs. Ramirez at school. Grandmother smiled and asked, "Do you think Mrs. Ramirez passed it on?" What do y'all think? Did Mrs. Ramirez pass it on? She did. and it kept going and going and going. So let's all try to do a kind thing, and we will pass it on. Okay?